The Mountain Man and the Lost Girls. The mountains had a way of swallowing sound. When the wind died down and the snow settled, silence pressed against the world like a heavy blanket. It was in that silence that Elijah Boone lived, in a cabin of rough-hewn pine on the shoulder of Lone Elk Ridge. For years, the mountain man had known only the voices of wolves in winter, the crackle of his fire, and the creak of his axe splitting wood. People down in the valley whispered about him, the reclusive trapper, the widower who had gone up into the wilderness after his wife died, a man who chose solitude over society. He had grown used to the quiet. It was a harsh companion, but a faithful one. He thought he would die with it, until the day he found the girls. Elijah had been tracking deer that morning, his rifle slung across his shoulder, when he noticed the prints. Not hooves, not paws, but small boots. 2 sets, side by side, weaving through the pines in a staggered path. The snow was fresh, fallen just the night before, and the tracks hadn't been there when he'd gone to check his traps. Which meant someone, no, some children, had wandered through recently. He crouched, studying them. They weren't hunting. They weren't walking with purpose. The prints dragged in places, circled, stopped, and started again. Lost. His gut tightened. These mountains could kill a grown man overnight if he was careless. For children, alone, it was a death sentence. Elijah followed. The trail led downhill, then cut toward a creek where the ice groaned beneath a thin crust of snow. He moved swiftly, every sense sharpened, until he heard it, the faintest sound of whimpering. He rounded a thicket of spruce, and there they were. 2 girls, no more than 6 or 7, bundled in threadbare coats. One had red ribbons in her hair, now frayed and frozen stiff. The other clutched a ragged doll with stuffing poking from its seams. Their faces were pale, their lips trembling blue from the cold. The older one stiffened when she saw him, pulling her sister close. Elijah raised his empty hand slowly, letting his rifle hang harmless on its strap. His voice was rough, but he made it gentle. "Easy there, little ones. I ain't here to hurt you." The younger girl began to cry. The older held herself rigid, eyes wide, caught between fear and hope. "You're lost," Elijah said. It wasn't a question. "Where's your ma?" The older one's lip trembled. She shook her head. Elijah cursed softly under his breath. He couldn't leave them there, not with nightfall only hours away. The cold would sink its claws into their bones. "Come on now," he said, shrugging off his heavy coat and wrapping it around both girls. "My cabin's not far. Got a fire there, food too. You'll be safe." The older girl hesitated. Then, perhaps sensing the sincerity in his voice, she nodded just once. Elijah lifted the smaller child into his arms, letting the older keep hold of his coat sleeve. They trudged back through the snow, his long strides careful so as not to lose them. The cabin was a dark shape among the trees, smoke curling from its chimney. Inside, the warmth hit them like a wave. Elijah stoked the fire higher, then fetched blankets from his bed, wrapping the girls until their shivering slowed. He ladled venison stew from the pot hanging over the fire. The smell made their eyes widen. They ate quickly, hungrily, the younger one smearing broth across her cheeks. Elijah watched in silence, leaning against the hearthstone. He hadn't shared a meal with another soul in years. Watching the 2 children eat stirred something deep inside him, something he thought had gone to the grave with his wife. When their bellies were full, the girls seemed braver. The older one finally spoke, her voice small. "Our mama. We lost her when the snow came. She told us to stay close, but then she was gone." Elijah's jaw tightened. Somewhere out there, A woman was searching for these girls. Or worse, she wasn't alive to search anymore. "What's your name, little miss?" he asked gently. "Clara," she said, squaring her tiny shoulders. "This is May." "Clara and May," he repeated, as if anchoring their names to memory. "Well, Clara and May, you'll stay here tonight. Tomorrow, we'll see about finding your ma." Clara looked at him warily. "Why are you helping us?" Elijah considered. He could have told her about his wife, about the child they never got to have, about the years of emptiness. But those were wounds too raw to share. Instead, he said simply, "Because no one should be alone in these mountains. Not little girls, and not me either." That night, after they'd drifted off in a tangle of blankets by the fire, Elijah sat awake in his chair. The cabin felt different with them inside it, warmer, somehow less hollow. The quiet that had once been his only companion now seemed too heavy, broken only by the soft breaths of the sleeping children. He found himself watching them, making sure they were safe, as though some long-buried instinct had awoken in him. Protector, guardian, maybe even something closer to a father. And for the first time in years, Elijah Boone realized he didn't feel so alone. But the mountains never allowed peace to linger. With dawn would come the search, and with it, a mother who might not be willing to let her daughter's rescuer remain a part of their lives. For now, though, he let the fire crackle, let the warmth soak into his bones, and let himself believe, if only for one night, that fate had led those girls to his door for a reason. A mother's plea and an unexpected proposal. The first light of dawn spilled across the ridge, painting the snow in streaks of rose and gold. Elijah Boone stirred from his chair by the hearth, stiff from sleep but alert. The fire had burned low, but its embers still glowed. On the rug before it, Clara and May slept curled together, their tiny chests rising and falling in rhythm. For a long moment, Elijah simply watched them. He couldn't remember the last time his cabin had felt alive like this. 4 years, it had been nothing but shadows and silence. Now, the laughter of 2 little girls, even faint in their dreams, seemed to echo through the walls like music. But with the dawn came duty. Somewhere out there, a mother was searching. Elijah set about making breakfast, corn cakes fried in a skillet, a bit of dried venison softened in the stew pot. The scent roused the girls. Clara sat up first, blinking against the light, then nudged her sister awake. "Morning," Elijah said gruffly, though there was a softness in his eyes. "Morning," Clara replied, her voice steadier than it had been the night before. After they ate, Elijah bundled them in blankets again, preparing for the trek. Clara looked uneasy. "What if we don't find her?" she whispered. "You will," Elijah said firmly. "Your ma's out there looking for you same as you're looking for her. I'll see you together again." And he meant it. They set out mid-morning, following the creek downstream where the snow thinned. Elijah carried May on his shoulders, her little hands gripping his hat, while Clara trudged beside him. He kept scanning the trees, ears pricked for any sound besides the wind. It wasn't long before he heard it, a woman's voice, hoarse and desperate, calling into the woods. "Clara! May!" Clara's head snapped up. "Mama!" she cried, breaking into a run. From between the trees stumbled a woman, her dark hair loose, her face drawn with worry. When she saw Clara sprinting toward her, she fell to her knees in the snow, arms outstretched. "Clara! May!" The reunion was a tangle of tears and embraces. Clara threw herself into her mother's arms, sobbing into her shoulder. Elijah lowered May, who clung tight to the woman's neck as though she would never let go. The mother kissed their faces over and over, unable to stop crying. Then her gaze lifted and met Elijah's. For a moment, the world stilled. Her eyes, wide and glistening, searched his face. She looked no older than her mid-20s, though hardship had etched lines of sorrow into her expression. "You," she began, then her voice broke. "You saved them." Elijah shifted uncomfortably, unused to praise. "Just gave 'em shelter for the night. They were half frozen when I found 'em." The woman rose slowly, still clutching her daughters, and stepped closer. Her gratitude radiated from every trembling breath. "My name's Anna," she said softly. "I don't know how to thank you. If you hadn't—" she cut herself off, her throat working. "I'd have lost them." Elijah gave a small shake of his head. "You don't need to thank me. Any decent man would have done the same." But Anna looked at him as though she knew that wasn't true. In this wild country, not every man was decent. They walked back together, Anna holding each daughter's hand tightly. At the cabin, Elijah stoked the fire high again, letting the girls warm themselves while Anna finally let herself rest. She sank into his chair, exhausted beyond measure. For a while, silence reigned, broken only by the crackle of flames and the children's quiet chatter as they played with the doll. Then Anna spoke, her voice low. "My husband, he died last spring. Fever took him fast. Since then it's just been us. I thought I could manage, hunting, trapping, moving through the passes. But yesterday's storm," she shook her head, shame flickering in her eyes. "I nearly lost them. I can't do this alone." Elijah felt something twist inside him. Her words mirrored his own years of struggle, the way grief and solitude gnawed at the bones. He understood her pain better than he wished he did. "You've done what you could," he said gently. "That counts for more than you think." Anna looked at him then, really looked, as if seeing past the rough beard and the worn flannel to the man beneath. "You live up here alone?" she asked. Elijah nodded once. "Since my wife passed." Her eyes softened. "Then you know." He didn't answer, but the silence was enough. The day stretched on. Anna insisted on helping prepare food despite her weariness, and Elijah found himself strangely moved by the sight of her in his kitchen corner, stirring the pot as the girls laughed nearby. It was as if the cabin remembered what it was like to be a home instead of a hermit's refuge. As evening fell, Anna put the children to bed. Then she stood by the fire, the glow painting her face in gold. She seemed restless, twisting her hands together. Finally, she turned to Elijah. "I don't want to leave," she said suddenly. Elijah blinked. "Beg your pardon." "I don't want to take the girls back down the mountain alone. Not after this." She stepped closer, her eyes steady though her voice trembled. "I've been trying to survive, but they need more than survival. They need safety. They need someone strong to watch over them." He swallowed hard, uncertain where she was going. "Mr. Boone," her voice steadied, "you've shown me more kindness in one day than most men would in a lifetime. You cared for my children as if they were your own. I see the way they look at you already. Clara trusts you. May won't stop talking about you." Elijah shifted uneasily, his chest tight. "They're good girls. Deserve better than a lonely mountain man." Anna shook her head. "They deserve someone who will love them. Protect them. I don't want to keep wandering, hoping I can be enough alone. So I'll ask you plain." She drew a steadying breath. "Will you marry me?" The words struck him like a blow. He stared at her, the fire crackling between them, his mind a storm. 4 years, he had buried his heart beneath layers of silence. 4 years, he thought he'd never hear those words again. "Anna," his voice was rough. "That's not a thing to ask lightly." Her chin lifted, determination flashing through the weariness. "Do I look like I'm asking lightly?" He studied her, the strength in her eyes, the fierce love that burned in her every glance toward her daughters. She was not a woman of frivolous words. She was a survivor, like him. Slowly, Elijah rose from his chair. He crossed the room, each step heavy as the mountains outside. When he stood before her, he reached out, calloused hand brushing her cheek. "If I say yes," he murmured, "then I'm yours. You and the girls. For as long as I've got breath." Tears shimmered in Anna's eyes. "That's all I could ever ask." And in that moment, surrounded by the warmth of firelight and the quiet of the wilderness, Elijah Boone, the lonely mountain man, found what he thought he had lost forever: a family. That night, the cabin no longer felt hollow. It was filled with laughter, with the sound of children dreaming, with the steady heartbeat of hope reborn. Outside, the mountains stood silent and eternal, witnesses to a vow unspoken yet stronger than stone. The wilderness had taken much from him. But now it had given something back. And Elijah knew, as he held Anna close and watched her daughter sleep, that loneliness had finally loosened its grip. He would never face the silence alone again.